Hi everyone, welcome to my video. My name is Claudia and I'm with Time for Stamping. Today I wanted to show you a card that I made with the Beautiful Pumpkins bundle. It has two-step stamping for the pumpkins, so you can use two different colors, two different shades of whatever color you like for your pumpkins, as well as some leafy vines and the stems for the pumpkins and a couple of sentiments. Now the bundle of course includes the die set, which cuts out the pumpkins and stems, and then also has extra dies which cut out some nice leafy viney embellishments that you can use, as well as some other stems if you'd prefer to use those. Okay, let me show you the card I'm going to do. And I've made this into a Thanksgiving Day card. So the reason I wanted to show you this one today is because I used the two-step stamping, which you can see, as well as added some gold and embossing powder onto that, and I wanted to show you just how I did that. So let's go ahead and get started. Now for my base, I have Cajun Craze, which is 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4 1/4, and it's just your basic A2 size card. And for my next layer, I have Basic Beige, which is 5 inches by 3 3/4. And cutting it a little bit smaller like this leaves that really nice border of the Cajun Craze around there, which is just perfect for the fall season. Okay, my next layer that I have is a layer of Gathering Together Designer Series paper. And I'm choosing to use this darker brown. It's like early espresso, and it has just a nice overall pattern into it. The back side is a nice plaid, which you can use for other cards, but this one I particularly liked this shade of brown for this. Again, just the nice color combination for the fall season. Now this piece is 4 7/8 by 3 5/8, and that way it gives us just a smaller border of the basic beige around it, and it really makes the Designer Series paper pop on this card. Okay, now my next layer actually is another piece of the same Designer Series paper, the Gathering Together, and you need about a piece about 4.5 by 3 inches, and as you can see I've cropped it, and it has the pretty little embossing on the edge. This is cropped with the Textured Notes dies. Now I love that die set because there's various sizes of rectangles in there, and each one of them has a different embossed embellishment on each edge. So this one is, like I said, about 4.5 by 3 inches, and that's going to go right on here. Again, you can notice the contrast in that, how pretty that looks. Before I put it on, what I'm going to do is take these one stamp from the set, which is just the nice leafy vines, leafy pumpkin vines, and we're going to do a little stamping right onto the Designer Series paper. Now I'm using Mossy Meadow, and I'm just going to put one right up in the corner like that and slanting in towards the middle, and then the other one I'll stamp it twice. Going to put that one about like that. Now the ends of these are going to be covered up, so we don't have to worry about that too much. But you can see how I positioned them onto that piece. Okay, and now we can go ahead and put this right on here. Again, I'm using glue, Tombow glue, but if you prefer to use adhesive runner, we have the seal that you can use. There we go, that goes right like that. And you can see how nicely the card's coming together already, just by gluing a few layers together and just a very minimal amount of stamping. Okay, speaking of stamping, we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to stamp 3 pumpkins. Now I'm using Peach Pie as my base for the pumpkins. And I like to stamp the detailed stamp first. I'm using Cajun Craze. And as I said, these are two-step stamping for both of these, the larger and the smaller pumpkin. So I'm going to actually stamp 2 large pumpkins. So I'll get all of the base part done, which again is in Cajun Craze. So I've got 2 large pumpkins and 1 smaller pumpkin. Okay, and then the next color I'm using is Pumpkin Pie. And this is the more detailed stamp, or I'm sorry, the more solid color stamp to fill in some of those spaces that the detailed stamp leaves. Okay, so this is going to go right on top. You just want to take a minute to center that on there. And the reason I like doing this on pumpkin pie or on peach pie as opposed to just using white cardstock or very vanilla is because it gives you another shade of orange in that pumpkin. Isn't that pretty? You've got the Cajun Craze, the pumpkin pie, and then the peach pie cardstock itself shows through just a little bit. So let's do that again. This is the Cajun Craze. We're going to put pumpkin pie with the other stamp on top of that. Now this is a more solid color or a solid stamp, and it's kind of large, so you want to hold it for a minute. Make sure all that ink transfers over. Okay, isn't that pretty? I just love the way these turn out. And then the small one, the same thing. The base is stamped with the detailed stamp and using Cajun Craze. And this is the more solid stamp, which is stamped with pumpkin pie. Put that right on top. And we have a beautiful set of pumpkins there. Okay, so let's put these aside for a minute. And we'll do a little bit more stamping. We'll stamp the stems. Now again, I'm stamping the stems on basic beige. You could use crumb cake if you want. Again, I like using a color rather than just white or very vanilla because it does show through a little bit. And if you use a colored cardstock, in this case I'm using basic beige, and I'm stamping with crumb cake, you get kind of a two-tone stem in there. So there's the large stem. I actually need 2 of those. And 1 small stem. Okay, so let's put this aside. And now I can go ahead and cut these out. So again, just using the dies on these. I will be right back. Now these dies are kind of small for the stems, so sometimes it's a good idea to use a piece of Post-it note to hold those in place so that the dies don't move around when you're about to cut through, roll them through your machine. Okay. And we'll go ahead and make sure they turned out okay. Got the small one here. And there's 1 large one. I need to cut out 1 more large one. Okay, there are my 2 large stems and my 1 smaller stem. And now we'll cut out these pumpkins. So again, we have the dies for these. Matches perfectly. So I've got 2 large and 1 small pumpkin to cut out. And actually, I've already cut out 1 large and 1 small. So I'm just going to cut out 1 more large pumpkin. And here we go. Okay, so now that we have these done, I'm going to show you how to put some embossing, some gold embossing on these. And just kick up the elegance just a little bit on these. Okay, so what you need, of course, is your Versamark. I'm going to do one of the large pumpkins first. And I've got gold embossing powder. So what I like to do is just hold it in your hand, just very gently scrape the edges of your piece against the card, or against the stamp, or against the ink, I should say. And it's clear, so you're not going to see it here. But essentially what I've done is just put a layer of Versamark around the whole edge of this pumpkin. Okay, and then I'm just going to lay it right on there. And it's going to pick up some of the Versamark, but it's not going to completely cover it. Okay, so let's just put our powder on there. And if you have too much powder, all you need to do is take your finger and very gently wipe some of that. And just get it so that it looks kind of almost mottled, or almost looks dirty with the powder on there. But you don't want to completely cover your pumpkin, or you're just going to have a gold pumpkin. Okay, so that is all I've done with that. You can see how that looks. Now when we heat it, the edges are a little bit more solid color. Oops, let's get that one edge there. There we go. And then the inside is going to have just a little few touches of the gold in it. You'll see how that looks. Okay, so now you can see how that gold looks so pretty, but you can still see the colors of the pumpkin shining through there. Okay, let's do that again for this one. And again, I'm just taking my Versamark pad, just kind of scraping the edges onto the pad. I think I got it all. It's hard to see. You can't really see it on there. And then just very gently laying this on, pressing ever so gently, which picks up just a little bit of the Versamark. Putting my powder on. And again, if you want to put less on there, just take your finger and just very gently kind of spread that around, and some of that will come off, okay? Okay, let's blow this one dry and see what happens. Oop, oop, oop. Okay, here we go. Keep that up. Okay, now you can see this one has a little bit less gold on than this one, which actually makes it kind of interesting. But if you notice, I've got a couple of spots here that didn't quite pick up the Versamark. So all I'm going to do is, again, hit the edge with the Versamark there a little bit. And we'll put a little bit more powder on and then heat it up again. You can always add more and heat it up, but of course you cannot take it off once it is heated, once that powder is melted. Okay, so that covered up those edges very nicely. Okay, let's put that down. And we'll do the same thing to the little pumpkin. Okay, just hitting the edges. Laying it down there. Putting it in the powder. And we are good to go. Okay, so now if you notice, at the top here, the stem is going to go over that. So if you're holding it, that's a good place to hold it rather than one of the other edges. Just in case the powder doesn't get there or it doesn't heat up there. It really won't matter because the stem is going to cover that area. Okay, so there's our little pumpkin. Isn't that pretty? I just love the way this turns out. And we can actually do the same thing to the stems. And for this, I'm just kind of laying the stem on there. Tapping some of the powder off. And we'll go ahead and heat that up. Okay, got one more little one here to do, or a big one I should say. So add that. And if you have too much, again, just take your finger, gently tap some of that off. And then go ahead and heat it up. Now these are kind of small, of course. So you really don't need a whole lot of embossing powder on there, but you can see how that, trying to get that to show for you on the camera, how it just adds a little bit of elegance to that. Oh my goodness. Okay, and here's the small one. Again, just kind of tap it on there. Tap it into your powder. And if you think it's too much, just gently tap it with your finger to take off some of that powder. And that way your colors will still show through. Okay. Okay, there we go. All right, so now we have all of our pieces stamped and gold embossed, and now we can start building. So the first thing I'm actually going to do here is just kind of lay them out on the card and see what position I like them in. Okay, so let me pull you in just a little bit closer. There we go. So these are going to go towards the bottom. I don't want to just line them up though. So let's see. If I put one like that, one kind of like that, the bigger ones, and these are going to be flat onto my base. Okay, those are going to be flat. And then this one I will be popping up on dimensionals. So if we kind of change the level, I guess you'd say, putting one a little bit higher, one kind of like that, and then the little one on top, they're looking pretty good. Okay, so again, let's put some glue on here. You can see I had stamped that before, and unfortunately what I did is I stamped both steps with Cajun Craze. I wasn't paying attention, and and hit my first stamp with Cajun Craze and then hit the second stamp with Cajun Craze, so you didn't have that nice contrast with all the colors in there. Okay, and as I said, these are just going to be flat onto the card base. One right kind of overlapping each other. And then the little one we're going to put up on dimensionals. So I have mini dimensionals here, but if you're using large dimensionals, no problem with that. You probably only need 2 if you're putting them on using larger dimensionals. Okay, so that's going to go kind of overlapping both of them like that. Okay, now you might have to hold these down for a minute, just because when you do heat them with the heat tool, they tend to warp a little bit, so you want to make sure that they're down there very, very tightly. And then we're just going to add the stems. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue, rather than putting it on the stem, I'm putting them on the pumpkin. That way I don't have extra glue that I don't really need. So this is going to go like that. And then this one will go up here. I think I need a little more glue there. There we go. Okay, and then the small one will go on here. Turn that to the side just a little bit. Isn't that pretty? Now the next thing I have is I use some of those dies to cut out some gold embellishments. This is just with the gold foil. And again, this is just using 2 dies. We have this one, which cuts out the little lines and 2 leaves, and this one cuts out 2 leaves, but they are separate. You can see they're not joined together, so you end up with 2 little leaves there. And they're so pretty when they're done in the gold. And with the gold on the pumpkins, it just really, really, really turns this into a really nice piece. Very elegant looking, which is nice for any time, any occasion you have in the fall, even for a birthday card. But as I said, I'm using mine as a Thanksgiving card. So I'm just going to put this kind of overlapping the stem a little bit. Again, I'm just using glue on these. And my larger leaf, I will put on the other larger pumpkin. Like that. And then, of course, the small leaf for the small pumpkin. Okay, see how nicely that's coming together? And again, make sure that everything is sticking down, because those pieces do warp a little bit. Okay, now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of the stamps from the Amber Autumn set. This is another beautiful fall set, and I like the Grateful for You sentiment. So I'm going to use Cajun Craze, and oh my goodness, where did I put it? I actually wanted to put that on here, and I used my stems on it. Okay, well, I'm not going to make that right now. I don't want to waste your time running and getting a piece of paper. But what you can do, let me just show you on this one. Stamp your greeting, if you use that, or happy birthday, or whatever you're using. Now, I used an old retired punch called Classic Label, but you could just use anything you wanted, or just put it on like a 3/8 inch strip and trim it if you want. and put that right up here. Kind of covers up this bare area there and just adds a nice, another little bit of elegance to that. Now for the inside, again, I have a piece of basic beige, and I'm first going to stamp that actually with my pumpkin, and I'm going to use the small pumpkin. So this will be the first stamp, which is Cajun Craze, and then the next stamp is Pumpkin Pie. Okay, right on top of that. And then we'll use the small stem with crumb cake to finish off our little pumpkin. Okay, and as I said, I'm going to make mine a Thanksgiving card. So I have just a Happy Thanksgiving stamp that I happen to have. And it actually comes, again, from a retired stamp set called Painted Pheasant. But there are plenty of Happy Thanksgiving stamps, if that's what you choose to do, that you can use. So that's going to go like that, and that's with Cajun Craze. That will go for the inside. And if you like, you can also stamp that little pumpkin on the outside of your envelope, just to give your recipient a sneak peek of what's coming. Okay, and again, this is 5 by 3 3/4, so we have that nice border of Cajun Craze around there. Okay, and I'll show you real quick, maybe with a piece of white here, just so you know how I would finish this off. Just to stamp my greeting. And as I said, I'm using an old punch called Classic Label. Now I'm going to be doing this with basic beige cardstock, but I just wanted to show you again that I would put this up on dimensionals and just set that right down like that. As you can see here, this is what that would look like. Okay, so this is the card. It's a very nice technique to add just a little bit of embossing to your images, and it adds just another little layer of elegance to it. I hope you like this card. If you want to give it a try, I'll have all of the cardstock measurements and supply list on my blog, which is Time for Stamping, and that'll be up later today. Thanks again for joining me. Bye-bye now.